This is our first video in the probability unit, and this one is on probability of simple events. So to start, we need to get some vocabulary down. The first is, what is probability? It's the chance that some event will occur. What is the probability that it's going to rain tomorrow, or that you're going to flip heads with a coin? A simple event is one outcome or a collection of outcomes. So basically just doing one thing and trying it as a trial. What would happen if I roll a die or I flip a coin? That's a simple event, something where we know the outcomes. And then that word outcome. It's a possible result in a probability experiment. So think of rolling a die, you could get a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6. Flipping a coin, you could get a heads or a tails. Drawing marbles out of a bag. Each of the different possibilities are one of the outcomes, something that could happen as a result. To find the probability of an event, we want to find the ratio that compares the number of favorable outcomes to the number of possible outcomes. What that means is, how many ways can I get what I want over what are the total number of possibilities I could get? So if we write it out, it's going to look something like this. The number of favorable outcomes on top, the number of total possibilities on the bottom. So another way to write it is, probability is the amount, is what you want over the total. How many ways can I get what I want out of how many total possibilities? The probability of a chance event is a number between 0 and 1 that expresses the likelihood of an event occurring. So basically think of it as falling on a scale from 0 to 1. The closer a number is to 0, the less likely it will happen. The closer the number is to 1, the more likely it will happen. So if you have a probability of 0, meaning there is a 0% chance of it happening, that means it is impossible. It can't happen. If you have a probability of 1, which is a 100% chance, that means it's a certainty, meaning it absolutely positively will happen. There is no possibility it won't. You know for certain. Halfway in the middle, that's 0.5 or 50% chance. It's equally likely as unlikely. So a 50% chance means half the time it would, half the time it won't. It's no more likely than the other one. On the positive side, we have 0.75 or 3/4. Here we had 1/2, which would be a 75% chance. That means it's more likely than not. So there's a likelihood that it will happen. It won't happen all the time, but more likely than not, it should occur. Down here we have a 1/4% chance, or a 25%. That means it's unlikely to happen. Yes, it could snow tomorrow, but it's pretty unlikely. The probability is pretty low for it snowing tomorrow for us. Okay? Wherever it falls along that line tells us something about how likely that event is to occur. Is it something that there's a very good chance of it, or something that there's a very small chance of it? Winning the lottery would be way down over here. Okay? Yes, it is possible to win the lottery, but the odds are very, very, very small. There's a nearly impossible chance of winning the lottery. So now let's try this with some actual problems. So the first one says, look at your standard die, a 6-sided die or a cube. Imagine you're rolling that, and we want to know what's the chance of getting a 6. So we write that as P6, probability of getting a 6. Well, we talked about our probability is how many times to get what I want versus the total. Think about a number cube. You could roll a 1, a 2, a 3, a 4, 5, or a 6. There's only one way to get what I want out of 6 total possibilities. Now, I'm going to have you writing these both as fractions, but also as decimals and percents. So as a decimal, this would break out to be 0.1666 repeated, or 16.6%. That's a 1 out of 6 chance. What's the probability of rolling an even number? So an even number, I could have a 2, a 4, or a 6. So that means 3 possibilities out of 6, or a 1 out of 2 chance. Always simplify your fractions. 3 out of 6. So as a decimal, that'd be 0.5, or as a percent, 50%. Okay? You're just counting how many ways can I get what I want out of how many total possibilities. Now we have something called complementary events. These are 2 events where one or the other can occur, but they cannot happen at the same time. So think of it as I could roll a 2, or I could not roll a 2, but I can't do both things at the same time. The sum of the probabilities of an event and its complement is 1, or 100%. So you have 100% of the possibilities rolled up into something happening or it not happening. For instance, the probability of rolling a 2 would be 1 out of 6. Probability of not rolling a 2, meaning getting a 1, a 3, a 4, a 5, or a 6, would be 5 out of 6. 1/6 plus 5/6 equals 1, or a 100% chance. So a complement is the opposite of something, not getting that item, which should be the exact opposite in its fraction. Try this one. A letter is chosen randomly from the letters here. Find the probability and write it as a fraction, a decimal, and a percent. So what's the probability of getting a B? Well, there's only one B. So how many ways to get what I want? Out of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 total possibilities. So I have a 1 out of 8 chance of drawing a B. As a decimal, that's going to be 0.125, and that's going to be 12.5% as a percent. Remember to turn a fraction into a decimal, you just divide. 1 divided by 8 in your calculator. Then I want to know what are the chances of getting a Q or an R. So I'm fine with either one of them. Well, there's one Q, there's one R, so there's 2 ways of getting what I want out of 8, which is a 1 out of 4. As a decimal, that's 0.25 or 25%. Next, what's the probability of getting a vowel? So hopefully you know your vowels. A, E, I, O, and U. So there are 3 vowels out of 8 total pieces. As a decimal, that's 0.375 or 37.5%. And then our last one. What's the probability of getting a T? What's the probability of drawing a T out of that group? Well, if you look at it, there are 0 T's out of 8 pieces, so we have a 0% chance of drawing a T. It's an impossibility. There are no T's in that set. Last one. A bag contains 5 red, 4 blue, and 2 green marbles. Find the probability that a marble drawn from the bag is not red. So we write that as P, not red. Well, we want to know how many ways can I get something that isn't red. Well, I have 4 and 2. That gives me 6. Total, there are 11 marbles. So there are 11 things that I could draw. So my probability is 6 out of 11. As a decimal, it's 0.545454, or 54.54%. So how many ways can I get what I want over how many total possibilities are there?